1 in 5 Canadians suffer from mental illness at some point in their life. Today's guest includes Dr. Mary Lynn, a registered psychologist and author who struggled with depression and anxiety. Stephen Rolfe, registered nurse and director of mental health services at Indwell. Carla Arges, mom blogger and author who is learning to thrive with depression, bipolar, and borderline. And Brett Ullman, author, speaker, father, husband who struggled with anxiety and depression for several years. In the end, we learn how fear keeps us from seeking help, why creating habits of wellness is important, and that we cannot do life alone. But before hearing from our guest, if this is the first time we've met, hello, my name is Addison Espilla, and welcome to See Hear Love Digital. On this channel, we share inspiring stories that remind us that we are seen, heard, and loved by God. So please consider subscribing to this channel and hitting the notification bell to see our weekly videos. Now, here are our guests.
If you think about different cultures where mental health issues are not even talked about, so they would just go see their physician.
Right.
Or they would keep it into themselves. And the other stats too is with kids, only 50% of them are getting the help that they need.
Wow.
And if you can address mental health at the early stages, so much better prognosis. It's amazing.
Right.
Yeah. It might look like we're not faithful enough. We're not praying enough.
We're not strong enough.
We're not strong
We're
enough.
That.
Because mental illness is seen then as a weakness, as opposed to just something that happens to us. It's a source of struggle. It's a source of suffering, but it doesn't define who we are.
Right. Yeah.
I never talk about the end of the road where they're going to be all better.
No.
I talk about growing in resilience.
Yes.
Growing
I love
in
that.
confidence that they can be okay, growing in faith.
Yeah.
Growing in their dependence on God and just making healthier choices for themselves.
Yeah.
So the goal isn't to be perfect, all fixed, because this side of heaven is that realistic. You know, when you are in a role of helping others, there's a lot of good that comes from that because you genuinely want to help others. But the downside of it is that, at least for me, I turned away from even thinking about myself and my needs. And I poured out and poured out. And I would say my depression came from and this is where shame is, like I kind of did it to myself. I have such an issue with people pleasing, wanting to basically rescue the world, and it's not possible. And when I would take on a responsibility, it felt like this was a responsibility for life. And in all honesty, it's just pride. Pride thinking that I can be like God in people's lives. All that to say, when I was living a life that was beyond what is humanly possible, I began to crash. So I remember saying I need to take some time off. And I thought, oh great, I'm gonna go on vacation, gonna spend some time by the lake. No, it was pretty ugly. And I had to get honest with myself at how low I went and why did I go that low. For me, the key was acceptance, was definitely reaching out to the Lord. And it was finally being honest enough with the people who cared about me and asking them for help. Yeah, I appreciate what everyone's been saying so far, especially about being able to track your thinking and make sure you're focusing on things you're grateful for. I mean, research shows that you can actually rewire your brain so that you're able to then release those happy hormones so you feel better. I want to also balance it with the truth that our emotions, they have a reason for existing, and that they're often messages that our emotions are telling us. And so for myself personally, having lived a life of suppressing my emotions, focused on caring for others, I didn't pay attention to my own needs. And I also didn't pay attention to my grief. And I've had situations happen to me throughout my life that I was raised in a family system that you just buck up and you just keep going. And so for me, that season of depression allowed me to get honest with how I actually felt about things and actually grieve. And seeking therapy to deal with some trauma. And in that also being able to invite and see God actually in those difficult moments. He was actually there. And so for me, the healing, there's a very distinct shift that happens inside of me when I can feel a sense of peace and love and know that Jesus was with me throughout my difficult times and that he understands my tears because he's also grieved and he's, I mean, it just was in Israel, just walking through the Garden of Gethsemane and just remembering how much he wept for his pain, but for ours as well. So keeping that in context then makes me feel less alone. And then out of that, I have greater courage to reach out. So I'm not walking alone, like with people, and beginning to say, okay, that is no longer true about me. I am no longer that broken, damaged, abused, whatever that situation is, I can choose forward. Again, what am I going to think about? What I'm going to focus on? What I'm going to be grateful for? And it doesn't mean that you don't have a need for medication or therapists.
I would say that's definitely reflective in my journey. It took me a long time to actually seek out the support and the help that I needed because I was afraid of what it meant and what it said about me and how I would be received or judged by others. So it really held me back from healing. It's a very challenging emotional thing to overcome when you already are in the throes of an emotional turmoil. It started in my youth and just this feeling like I was broken and didn't belong and wasn't worthy, and just such repressive thoughts that had me when I was 13 try to kill myself for the first time and tried to numb the feeling of brokenness throughout my youth with substance, and just it's been a long journey for diagnosis because I was afraid to come clean. I questioned, like, what did it mean for me as a Christian? Am I not faithful enough? Do I have sin in my life that I'm not repenting of enough? Is this a punishment? And it really kept me from seeking help and getting me further and further away from God in shame, further and further away from the support systems in shame, until I finally realized that I have an opportunity to take control of my health, and I have a responsibility now that I'm a mom to take care of my health. And that really was a switching point for me. And how can I show up for him, my son, the best? And I realized that I had to put the stigma aside and go and seek treatment, that it was no longer about me not being Christian enough or me being broken, but this is just about mental health and mental illness, and something that I had an opportunity to take a bit of control over with the resources that are available to us that we don't always know about because we put on our blinders and our earmuffs. We don't want to hear about this stuff because it hits close to home and it makes us have to face our own realities of mental health. But in real life has ebbs and flows, whether you are in the midst of struggling with mental health or not. There is a range of human emotions that we are designed to feel, and it's okay to feel them. And it's learning how to sit in some of those emotions and know that I'll be okay. This is a wave. I'm going to come out on the other side. And it's a practice in doing that. It's about creating habits of wellness, and that's how I look at it. What are my habits of wellness? I need to move my body because there's so much release that happens, so much that we can influence in our happy hormones, as I call them. I need to eat right. I need to manage my sugar, because the reality is, with someone who deals with mood disorders, I have to take control of how I'm allowing my body to crash, limiting alcohol, limiting caffeine, limiting sugar. I have to be intentional with gratitude. I have to frame my thoughts. I have to, through seeing my therapist and learning how to rewrite the story in my head, it's a very practical way that we renew our mind in speaking the truth over myself and understanding that my feelings do not dictate the reality. My feelings do not dictate my identity. And just creating habits of wellness, but it has to be intentional. And you have to create it as a habit, because you're not always going to feel motivated. When I'm lying and stuck under my weighted blanket and it's a battle to get to the shower, it's not going to be motivation that gets me there. It's going to remember that I have to be disciplined, because no one else is going to do it for me, and take control of my wellness and create a habit around it. And I have to catch my language. In mental health especially, we identify. I used to say, I'm bipolar. No, I'm not bipolar. I'm Carla. I have bipolar. You don't hear someone with diabetes say, I'm diabetes. And yet I take these on as our identities. And we have to get stronger and better at separating the two. Because that's actually part of my wellness habit, is I take medication. And for a long time, I was afraid of going down that path of what did it mean? Did it mean I'd given up? No, it means that I'm working on getting whole, and that's part of my wellness.
I guess what I do is I flip the statistics. So when I look at 1 out of every 5, I think about 4 out of every 5 people likely encountering somebody with a mental health issue, knowing the person by name. They may even be a family member. So for me, it actually represents opportunity or lost opportunity in some ways. So stigma would be lost opportunity to actually come around and actually provide support. to people or create the opportunities for community and social networking that's so helpful for people in their recovery.
Sure.
So I have a bit of a different take because I can talk about a practice of care and a practice of caring. And my interest or involvement, I love people. So I decided when I went into nursing, it really resonated with me, the opportunity just to listen to people and to be with people. And it's interesting when we talk about faith and coming alongside people. Mine is a faith of practice, and I would say that many of my colleagues at Indwell share that. That it's a faith of doing. It's not just telling somebody that, to pray more. It's walking alongside people, bringing people into community, supporting people when they need it, letting people know that they matter. One of the things that strikes me the most is not what I've taught people, but what I've learned from people. So many of the individuals I've been privileged to work with over the years are people who've had profound struggles with mental health issues, people in institutions or on the street or in shelters. And you really have an opportunity to actually see hope in action. You really do see dignity of all people, the image of God present in people, even when they're on the street, and it's so instructive. I've learned a lot, and I've been able to turn that around. I think the thing that affected me the most in a practice in mental health is the understanding that treatment is crucial, it's important. Going to your physician is important. Getting the help you need is important. But it doesn't end there. We need each other. We were created to be in community with each other. So when folks are leaving hospitals or institutions, having good housing, having a decent place to live, safety, the opportunity to actually be a neighbor, not to have a good neighbor, but to actually be a neighbor. The world really does need Mr. Rogers. And those are the things where you've seen profound change and remarkable stories of. There's one of our tenants at Indwell that I love to talk about. This was a gentleman who struggled with mental health issues for years, came into our housing and our programs, and has developed this wonderful life of volunteerism. You see him walking all over the city, doing all kinds of marvelous things. One of the most interesting things was there was actually a public health endeavor around cancer screening. They needed to have photos of citizens going up in bus shelters to get early cancer screening. And so I walked by a bus shelter and there's our tenant. And I'm just struck by that as, when we talk about stigma earlier on, it's creating those opportunities for people to emerge into roles that everybody else can actually appreciate and identify with. And when you see folks being represented that way as members of the community in their own right, then I think we've moved forward, and I just wish we'd have more of it. And I guess I could speak for people who are actually in a position of being a helper or being a caregiver. It's, for us at Indwell, it's always been about taking Love Thy Neighbor seriously, and it's not just direct actions with people, it's creating environments, creating the space where people can recover, creating the space where people can explore nutrition or have access to food. Food security is important. Creating the space where people can access their physician or other prescriber or other treatment facilities as they need. It's really coming alongside people, listening, meeting people where they're at, and being prepared to walk a very long road on individual recovery journeys. It's not an overnight solution. Creating the conditions and letting people know that they're loved. We often say that as a landlord, we're a landlord that will actually knock on your door and ask you, how are you doing today?
The statistics are interesting to me. When I travel and speak and I ask who knows someone who struggles with mental health, it's like every hand in the whole room goes up every night. So whether it's 1 in 5, 1 in 4, 1 in 3, it just seems to be everywhere you go today. It doesn't matter coast to coast, Canada, US, anywhere in the world. Doesn't matter what age, ethnic background. Just that's kind of all of us these days. But the stigma I see, but I see it even worse when I'm dealing with men. When I go and do like a men's breakfast, and I'm very open. I've had 8 years of struggle, and it's incredible how many guys after come up and go like, "You struggle with this?" And I'm like, "Yeah." But it's kind of the idea. Well, if you can, and you're sort of normal. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, mental health for too often has been those people. And now that it's like someone that they can see, they think is fairly normal, they're like, well, if you can deal with this, maybe I can deal with this.
Wow.
And they kind of, one guy said, I'm going to come out of the closet tonight. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, from a mental health standpoint, he says, I've never told anyone my struggles with mental health. And I just hear a lot, especially from men, but even for women, right? It's just, even in our church world, we're almost scared to say we struggle because of what the ramifications might come back to us.
Yeah.
It's interesting, we were kind of chatting backstage, coming on anything with mental health. Now, I know you, so I wasn't worried, but I'm always worried sometimes speaking in church environments on mental health, because you don't know the response of like you just said a minute ago, like, you know, pray more, read your Bible more. Those are good things. And I think language, we have to be and people, not or people. It's not your Bible or medication. It's the Bible and medication. So it's an and language, but it was nice chatting because like I mean, I also have struggled. I'm on almost 8 years now. So I left teaching. I did a program called the Aero Leadership Program, went straight from that into a master's degree down in Chicago. Now speaking 300 dates a year to pay for it, which is fully unsustainable. So I graduated, I spiraled for 5 months, and then I collapsed in a parking lot and spent 5 months, I didn't really leave my house, and I didn't work for about a year. And I'm 8 years later, and there's irony in my journey in that I still struggle. Like even today, my anxiety is about an 8 or 9 out of 10. But the ebbs and flows of life, like I find I kind of have good days and I have bad days. But I'm still journeying and I'm still doing all those things that I think I need to do to walk that path towards healing. But I resonate with all the different conversations. For sure. When this all started, I mean, many, many years ago, one of my first psychologists said to me that to facilitate healing, we have to divide up the indivisible. It was a really interesting line. And I mean, I began, like I've spoken on mental health even before this, a lot more self-harm and those different things. But having a breakdown, being at home for a year, and then seeing some of the comments the church often gives you, some of the, have you stopped reading your Bible? Kind of like God goes, bzz, if you stop reading your Bible. I began to create another talk, the one that I do these days on mental health. But I really use the analogy body, mind, and soul. You said it a minute ago, physical, emotional, spiritual. And so I know that I can only control what I can control. So I do what I can do. I can eat better, I can sleep more, I can exercise daily, I can watch my thought life and watch how I'm dealing with all those things, make sure I'm not overscheduling. Now, there are seasons when you, like I'm a speaker, so like November was crazy. I was in 3 provinces, I'm traveling a lot, but it's not a life, it's just a season of busyness. But I can do that, and then I let people do what they can do. So my psychologist, I have people dealing not only with my Lyme disease, but I have like doctors involved with, my naturopath is working ongoing, trying to figure out what is the root issue of all my struggles. And then, so it's body, the mind, and then of course, letting God, Father, Son, and Spirit move in the journey as well. So for me, it's just kind of like I have a note at home, it says body, mind, and soul, and every day I gotta move forward in one of those things. Well, and none of us know which of those things will be the thing.
Right.
I went to a sleep clinic and the doctor said I had fragmented sleep. I'm like, I know. I said, can you help me? He said, no. And I must have looked a bit sad. I think my shoulders dropped. And he said, no, this is good. You can tick it off that that's not your issue. A friend of mine who's a youth pastor was at home for a year, went to a sleep clinic. They said the worst sleep apnea they've ever seen. He was better in 1 day. But his church said, it's not medical, it's spiritual. So you're not to go to doctors. And finally, I'm like, just go to a sleep clinic. And he did. So like, I can't look at you and say, well, yours is physical, yours is emotional, we don't know. So it's 3 roads that I kind of take on an ongoing basis.
That's good. So body, mind, and soul.
Body, mind, and soul. Wow. Okay. So today's video was the longest See Her Love Digital episode so far we've done. We're still trying to figure out how long our videos should be. Let me know in the description below. Do you prefer shorter videos, longer videos? At any rate, if you found this video helpful, then please help YouTube algorithms to suggest this video to others just by clicking the like button. Until next week, always remember, you are seen, you are heard, and you are loved by God.